Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this lovely Saturday morning. I promise we'll try to make it worth your while. We have a rich and varied panel for you today, and each presenter will have, we're going to shoot for about 5 to 10 minutes to introduce you to their respective projects, and then we'll have a conversation that I'll initiate with a few questions, and then we'll open it up to you folks. So I'm going to introduce myself and then our panelists, and then we'll get started. I'm Will Fenton. I write for PC Magazine. I write reviews on EdTech, and I also write a column called The Autodidact. In addition, I have a sort of academic perch at Fordham University, where I am a student, a teacher, and an administrator. So I'm very excited to hear what everyone else has to say today. Our first presenter will be Robert Steiner, who directs online teacher education at the American Museum of Natural History. Following Robert, we'll have Allegra Smith at MoMA, who produces online courses for a range of different audiences. Nedde is at the International Monetary Fund, and she will discuss how she manages the online learning program there for the Institute for Capacity Development. And then finally, we'll have virtually Lance Warren, who's going to Skype in and talk about his work with the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, for which he produces online courses, video services, and virtual field trips for history teachers. So, with that said, I'm going to turn the mic over here to Robert. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. Great to come to Teachers College, and wonderful to have a chance to speak a little on this large and very important topic. I'm going to approach it mostly from the standpoint of science literacy, which is a deep and which is a topic of deep and abiding importance to the Museum of Natural History. And I think that most of us understand the need for a better understanding among the public of science. Many of us are familiar with surveys that indicate that about half of Americans are not, don't know that the Earth goes around the sun, and so it's not surprising that there are, there's a whole host of challenges in terms of deepening understanding about things like climate change and nuclear terrorism and evolutionary theory, vaccination, stem cells, and so on. And so that is an important challenge for all of us, in which where we live in a democracy that really requires its citizens and its representatives to know something about these matters that really will affect all of our lives. The challenge, of course, in some ways is that science has developed a reputation of being boring and difficult and inaccessible to all but the most highly initiated. The rift between scientists and the sciences and the humanities, was discussed about 60 years ago by C.P. Snow, who characterized it as this rift between two cultures, a rift of mutual incomprehension. Whether or not that's a useful dichotomy or not, there's no doubt that science has become, remains a fairly isolated topic. It doesn't receive much news coverage. A lot of the science sections of newspapers have been decimated, have been eliminated, and where it is discussed, it is often frankly distorted for political purposes, and so there's a big challenge ahead. And so the result is that many of us have to work even harder to try to demystify science and to make it an engaging topic that students and children and adults have a real interest in. The American Museum has been engaged in working with the public to deepen engagement and understanding of science since its founding in 1869. Let's see. Sorry, having trouble with the advancing. Great, thanks. Okay, well, anyway, you can see it's a great place. We've got a lot of really cool things going on. And of course, there's the Big Blue Whale, the Hall of Planet Earth. In fact, we have 45 permanent exhibition halls, dioramas, the Hall of the Universe, the Hall of Pacific Peoples, and our Discovery Room. And in addition, oops, this is going a little too fast. Hold on. Okay, that works. Sorry about that. This technology. So we have 45 permanent exhibition halls, and in addition to all these wonderful things, spaces to show the public, the museum is also a very active research center, which has more than 200 full-time scientists in areas of vertebrate and invertebrate zoology, anthropology, paleontology, earth and physical sciences. They go on about, these are some of the scientists from yesteryear. These scientists go on more than 200, I'm sorry, this thing is running away with me somehow. Okay, this is not one of our scientists, but he's sort of an honorary Ben Stiller Knight at the museum. And so those scientists go on about 100 field expeditions a year, and they are the stewards of more than 33 million specimens and cultural artifacts there. All that potentially daunting science is there, and yet the museum manages to engage more than 5 million visitors a year who are fascinated by it, and all of those incredible resources and spaces and experiences are available for people, and they can pay whatever they wish. Although in general, we'll be grateful if you pay the $22 generally suggested admission fee. Students, seniors with ID, $17. The museum puts on a large array of programming for all audiences. Not all of those events are offered free of charge, but many of them are. So it includes things like workshops on the brain and climate change, super science labs for kids, the Margaret Mead Film Festival, and so on. Over the last 20 years, the museum has become a real leader in terms of the creation of digital resources, and so we have things like the Known Universe, which you can find on YouTube. I think it's the most popular science and technology video out there. It's gotten millions and millions of viewings, and so basically it gives you a tour of the universe, starting from the Himalayas and going out to the furthest reaches of the universe, all in about 6 minutes. We have also created apps. We have cards, online baseball cards essentially for kids about science. We have science bulletins, video effort that captures current research, recent discoveries across the sciences, including, for example, the exploration of Peruvian ice caps that are melting. And we have online courses for teachers. For the last 15 years, we've been creating online courses. We have got 13 of them now. These are graduate courses for educators across the United States and around the world. We partner with higher ed institutions to offer graduate credit for those courses. We've had about 10,000 enrollments over those 15 years, and I know 10,000 is a very puny number to this audience, but these are graduate courses with human, not machine-graded assessment, and very rich courses. In the spring of 2013, we joined Coursera as a member of its a new teacher professional development portal. It's so nice that Andrea and some of her colleagues are here today, because she was so instrumental in helping us make those actually turn into reality. It still practically killed us, but we did it. And so in the fall of 2013, just 2 years ago, we rolled out three MOOCs, and they were in genetics, earth science, and evolution. And those were, I won't go into the details of the efforts or the courses, but they were, although they're in the Teacher Professional Development Portal, of course, those courses are freely open to anyone. And so, one of the things that we discovered is that only about 40% of the participants were actually identified themselves as educators, and so there was quite a motley crew of other folks from more than 200 countries and territories around the world, and as is not unusual, at least in Coursera, I think a fairly high level of academic study was completed there. The courses themselves, again, I won't get into much detail, but just to say that they're really a mingling of content and practice with videos, essays, quizzes, and so on. We had a scientist and an educator essentially serve as co-authors of that course, so that the participating educators got a nice combination of both scientific content as well as classroom relevance, classroom application. Here's a page from the evolution course. Joel Craycroft and Dave Randall, who was here yesterday, were the co-instructors for that course. And so that's all about Darwin and how evolution happens, species, and human evolution, and so on. Really fascinating course. We shot some new video, we repurposed some existing video for the effort, and so these are screenshots of a video that in which Joel Craycroft gives a really very nice behind-the-scenes tour of the collections of the ornithology department. And this includes birds of paradise and their really remarkable mating behavior. You can see sort of that weird oval sort of a green and black blob there is actually a bird of paradise that's expanded itself in mating behavior. It's just really interesting stuff. There are essays about DNA fingerprinting. There are multiple choice quizzes, discussion forums, peer graded assignment. This is from the Earth course, in which we have people go out and actually explore some local geological formation and then record it, and then come up with some ideas about what was behind its formation, and then had people sharing what they found and their photos from around the world in the discussion forums. And so this is an example of somebody posting something from a cliff in Black Rock, which is a suburb of Melbourne, Australia. So it's really wonderful the way that we were able to have people come in and share their learnings with each other. I should say that in addition to Coursera, we've also been working with Khan Academy, and so we have several efforts in science across the universe, dinosaurs, evolution, that we have gotten out there, and that, of course, is also a very heavily trafficked site. I don't want to take up too much time here, but just in terms of turning to that broader question about educating the public, what does all this mean? I have to say that personally I've met many people, scientists and others, who've come to the museum who and have told me with great passion and great appreciation just how important the visit to the museum was for them. I have heard that Stephen Jay Gould, the great evolutionary biologist, when he was just a young boy, came to the museum, saw this incredible T-Rex, and told his parents that this is what he wanted to do with his life. So the ability of museums, informal science institutions to inspire people, to engage them, I think is very real. it's really, for me, it's been very interesting because I spent most of my life in higher ed institutions, and I never imagined that there was anything actually useful for me to do in a museum. And so I've only come to appreciate, since being there the past 12 years, that just how important their mission is in terms of engaging people of all ages, and in getting them to the path where they are prepared for that deeper understanding that either we can give them or that higher ed institutions and others can give them as well. And so so I think that all of this is informed by a lot of research in what works in informal settings, and these are some of the these are prime aspects that have been identified, and I don't think we'll try to delve into them deeply here, but I think that there are a lot of really interesting themes that have been mentioned at this conference, and clearly the challenge is in terms of trying to figure out how we use these MOOCs as part of a larger tool set in order to engage people and to improve their what can be done within them in terms of interactivity, collaboration, social learning. And so I think that I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's a great road to be on. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Allegra Smith. I am the Associate Educator in Interpretation Research and Digital Learning at the Museum of Modern Art. And I just want to give an overview of some of the online courses and MOOC offerings that we have at MoMA. MoMA has been producing online courses now for about 5 years. So we started in 2010, and we really looked to what we were doing on site as inspiration for creating online courses with, the idea of being able to give more access to people around the world. So we started with 2 different types of courses. These are a couple of video stills and an actual screenshot of one of our courses on learning to paint like post-war abstract expressionist painters. So Corey D'Agostine is one of our educators. We filmed him doing different painting techniques and also in the galleries talking to people about, here's a work by Jackson Pollock, let's learn about Pollock and some of his techniques, and then we're going to bring you into the studio and actually show you how to do this. In addition to this, we have 6 other online courses that we charge for. They're for-profit, and they are both enrichment courses, kind of intro to modern art, also some that are more thematic, talking about 5 puzzles of contemporary art and some issues with modern and contemporary art today. So we started offering these as instructor-led versions, meaning you would log in, you would have interactions and discussion forums. It was a very synchronous environment. You were able to connect with both the lead instructor and also with your peers. But we wanted to make sure that this was still an intimate online learning environment, so we kind of capped out at 45 learners. We thought was a good number. Again, some people were really active in posting and sharing their work. Other people like to be this kind of fly-on-the-wall learner and still interested in seeing what other people were talking about, but they didn't really want to participate. It was a great experiment for us, but we realized that it was kind of limiting to offer these as session-based courses. So, you would sign up in the fall or the winter and spring session, but we realized there was still a lot of interest out there. So we started creating these self-guided versions. The content was exactly the same. The only difference was there was no longer a discussion environment. It proved to still be really successful. Some people, again, didn't want that interaction with their peers, but they were really interested in the content. So we shifted over to start doing that as well. Again, that's kind of more of an asynchronous approach to learning, but you have that option to access the content 24/7. Everything's there, you log in, and it's kind of your own self-guided experience. Another interesting thing about these courses is they were really long. Most of them are either 8 or 10 weeks long, with some content or some videos spanning up to 45 minutes in content. So it was a much more rich and engaging environment, but it proved to be, the instructor-led courses proved not to be as sustainable. As this notion of free online education has emerged, we started to think about other ways to produce content. Another project that we've delved into recently is producing courses for our MoMA teens. So we have a wonderful on-site program where we bring students into the museum after hours and, or after school rather, and allow them to engage with our collection and other artists in different ways. So about 3 years ago, we toyed with this idea of, well, what if we produced an online course for teens? So we brought in a group of 9 students who had already engaged in different on-site programs, taught them what an online course was, gave them the ability to actually go through some of our old courses and take a course so they could kind of get a sense of what it would be like, and then really turned it over to them and allowed them to produce the content themselves. So on the top here, you can see is we allowed the students to go and interview actual artists. So this was taken this summer where Carolyn Salas, a local artist in Brooklyn, the students went out with our camera crew, and they interviewed her and got some insight about her work, but it was also really a great opportunity for students to kind of reflect on what they were interested in and have the opportunity to ask a practicing artist about it. Furthermore, we brought in a couple of curators, and they had a conversation with them and just sat down and said, okay, what is it like to be a curator? What are some of the challenges you face? How did you get down this road? And it was a really wonderful way for them to interact with our museum staff and other artists in a way that they haven't before. You can also see this image here was taken from a video about art and feminism. So the kids also dressed up. So we have a Georgia O'Keeffe, a Frida Kahlo, Marina Abramovic, and Yoko Ono. And the students got into character, and it's a very playful approach, but they were still able to hit on some very heavy topics, but just in kind of more of an engaging way for their peers. So we've offered 2 versions of these courses now. Our third one is about to launch in November, and what's really exciting about it is it's an international collaboration for the first time for teen online courses. So we partnered up with the Art Institute of Chicago and the Tate to produce the courses. We kind of walked them through and said, this is how we've done it in the past, this is the type of content that we're interested in you guys producing, and just kind of go forth from there and see what happens. And it proved to be a really wonderful opportunity for us, for students in all of these teen programs to kind of reflect on what their museum means to them and what art in general means to them and how it's impacting their lives. So interestingly enough, a lot of the other organizations went out and they interviewed artists, they interviewed the public, talking to them about some challenging issues surrounding art. So we're really excited about this course. It'll launch again at the beginning of November. And then we also offer MOOCs. So MoMA partnered with Coursera in the summer of 2013 as a teacher professional development partner, meaning all of the content that we produced was geared through K-12 teachers, and it was supposed to be a skills-based course. So the first one we launched was all about inquiry-based teaching. The second one was about how to teach with different activities to slow down the learning process and engage with students and learners in different ways, specifically about modern and contemporary art. And the most recent one we just launched is called Modern Art and Ideas, and that one is about looking at art through theme. So we explore places and spaces, art and identity, art and society, and transforming everyday objects. So it's a different way to look at art instead of just chronologically or kind of these overviews of modern and contemporary art. Instead, we grouped 16 objects into these 4 themes and provided a different entry point for learners. Partnering with Coursera has been great. It's been a very different approach to how we've produced courses in the past. We found our courses are a little bit shorter, but the content is still very approachable and very accessible for everybody. Interestingly enough, like Rob was saying, we noticed that about half of our learners were not actually teachers, and they were just interested in the content. Especially on Coursera, we found that there is not a lot of information about modern and contemporary art, so that was a really big benefit for us to partner with them. And it was also a great way to hit a much wider audience. We still had a pretty large international audience for our other online courses, but one of the benefits of partnering with someone like Coursera is that there's already a big, vast community on there. So it was exposure to a wider group of people that we had not been able to target in the past. Back in October, we were elevated to full partner status with Coursera, which was really exciting for us because it's another opportunity for us to produce content in a way that we've done before, which is not limited to a specific teacher professional development audience, but rather a much wider group of people. it's also a way for us to kind of tie back into more of our permanent collection and also talk about some of the exhibitions that are going on. So the next course we're launching will be on photography to coincide with An Ocean of Images, which is our new exhibit opening up in November. So we're very excited about that, and it's also a great way for us to collaborate with the curatorial departments in a new way that we haven't done before. So that's kind of a general overview. I know we're kind of pressed for time here, but I wanted to also just show a quick video. We've kind of gone about video production in a different way for our courses. We've experimented with a bunch of different techniques, and in this most recent course that we just launched, Modern Art and Ideas, again, we were talking about looking at art through themes. So this is just a short 4-minute video, but it's about art and identity, and you'll see it's a different way of production. I won't say much more, but if you want to just roll it, that would be great.
Modern art helps us understand not only the artist, but also ourselves. This video is called Art and Identity, a theme we will explore using 3 works. Since their marriage in 1929, Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo had been Mexico's most well-known couple. While Diego was a painter who was famous for his large murals, Frida was a painter who was famous for being his wife. But in 1938, Frida's paintings were starting to get attention. So she takes her first solo trip abroad. She has her first solo shows in Paris and London. Her style is unique. Was it Mexican folk art? Was it surrealism? When asked, Frida simply said, "I paint my own reality." Picasso gives her earrings, the Louvre buys a painting. Both shows are a success. She returns home, divorces her husband Diego Rivera, and paints self-portrait with cropped hair. Her art had always been in response to her life.
I would imagine that it would be a process that was sometimes very hard for her. She used her artistic process as sort of an outlet.
She marries her love Diego Rivera, and she paints this. She divorces her love Diego Rivera, and she paints this. She was determined not to merely be the ex-Mrs. Rivera. Diego had loved her long hair and her colorful dresses. Frida painted herself without either.
She's seated in this chair with a pair of shears in one hand and a piece of her long hair in the other. She seemed to reveal a lot about herself as an artist. She was willing to kind of go to those places that not everybody is willing to go.
In 1940, this is how Frida saw herself. In 1993, Glenn Ligon asked 10 friends how they saw him.
Ligon instructed his friends, imagine that I've gone missing, and how would you describe me as a missing person? Get straight to the point. What are the essential details?
Here's what they said. A black man, 5'8", very short haircut, nearly completely shaved, stocky build, 155, 165 pounds, medium complexion, wearing faded dark sleeve button-down, slightly long.
If you read it, the information is about me, but also it's not about me.
He takes those descriptions and prints them beneath 19th century images of slaves. He called it Runaways. The series was made up of 10 prints.
Trying to find someone to love, someone to help me settle down.
Now, part of the point in doing this is to try to get at the ways that slavery and the language around it continues to be important to us today.
They read and looked very similar to the real thing.
We always imagine that slavery is something in the past and that we as a society have gotten over it. It's sort of gone, but we still feel its effects.
A reminder that his identity was still shaped by that past. Marilyn Monroe's identity, however, was shaped by the public. In 1953, this is how America saw her. One of many publicity photos for the film Niagara. She was about to become one of the most famous people alive. A decade later, she dies of a drug overdose. Within a few months, Andy Warhol takes that publicity photo and creates this painting. The tabloid culture as we know it took off in the 1950s. The American public was no longer satisfied by this. They wanted this. After After Monroe's death, everyone's trying to tell her story, paint the definitive portrait. Who was she really? Who wants the truth? That's what show business is for. To prove that it's not what you are that counts, it's what they think you are. Warhol takes the publicity photo and creates this, a silkscreen of a photo, a reproduction of a reproduction, against gold. I don't know where the artificial stops and the real starts. It was Warhol's definitive portrait of Marilyn Monroe, the tabloids, and the public. How America saw Marilyn Monroe in 1962, how Glenn Ligon's friends saw him in 1993, and how Frida Kahlo saw herself in 1938.
Okay, so that is part of our latest course, Modern Art and Ideas. As you can see, it's a very different way to approach production. That course is kind of geared on a two-track set where we wanted to cater to our audience of K through 12 teachers, but also find a way to engage with the larger audience of the non-educators who were still interested in our content. So we structured it to have these kind of intro videos here, and then the follow-up is, kind of more of the talking head aesthetic of breaking down these themes, talking about, okay, art and identity, here's how you can teach with it, these are some other tips, what age groups it's for, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's a quick overview of MoMA online courses and MOOCs. Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow. 2 museums and then Marilyn Monroe at the end. So, and I'm going to talk about macroeconomics. So, but I'd like to. So I'm Ellen Nedde. I oversee the online learning program at the International Monetary Fund. I'm an economist there, and somehow moved into this area of online learning. We've been doing this. We partnered with edX in the spring of 2013. Developed our first online course, launched it that fall, and then delivered it as a MOOC for the first time in the summer of 2014. So we've developed 5 MOOCs so far, and so I just want to give you a bit of background on some of the results that we've gotten so far, why we're in this business to begin with, why is the IMF even developing MOOCs? I thought we were supposed to be out there saving Greece from disaster. And then talk a bit about the outreach that we're trying to do with this, and to go to the public education theme, to talk about what we hope to achieve outside of sort of our traditional work. So the courses that we've delivered so far, we've seen some interesting results, and a lot of those, I think, do stem from the original purpose of these courses and the audiences we were trying to reach. We've had a pretty good pass rate of about 60% of certificate earners out of the active participants in the course. About a quarter of our certificate earners are from sub-Saharan Africa. So we're really reaching a part of the world that I don't hear as much about when I talk to other MOOC providers. I hear a lot about India and Brazil, and of course the United States. We get a lot of participation from the US. And we're reaching those countries too, but we're also reaching a lot of sub-Saharan Africa. And quite related to that, we also are reaching low-income developing countries. So about a third of our certificate earners are from low-income developing countries, so more like Sudan and Somalia and Bangladesh and Haiti, as opposed to all, coming from like India and Brazil, and then, the industrialized countries. So why are we doing this? Why are we getting those results? But also, first, why are we even doing this? The work that most people are familiar with the IMF has to do with our lending programs. We act as like a credit union to the world. We have 188 member countries, and our program with Greece, along with the European Central Bank and the EU, has been making the headlines lately. We also kind of oversee the overall operation of the international monetary system, and so those high-level meetings make the news as well. But another big piece of what we do is what we call capacity development, and that's where my work is. So about a quarter of our IMF operations are really involved in delivering technical assistance and training in the area of economics and applied finance and statistical issues as well, although I'm not as involved in that. So the training courses that we deliver are, before we had the online program, they were intensive 2-week courses. So full-time for 2 weeks, we would bring about 30 government officials to a central location and do very applied training in economics and finance, in monetary policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate policy, focused on case studies. So we would really draw on the experience of IMF member countries, what policies were successful, which were less successful. We would draw on data and build these case studies on actual countries. But it's quite expensive to deliver that kind of training. We've got to fly people in, even though we have, as you can see on the map, quite an extensive arrangement of regional technical assistance and training centers. We still have to fly these people in, put them up for 2 weeks, and it's very expensive to do it. We don't charge for our courses. It's a benefit of membership. We don't charge for our technical assistance either. So it's quite expensive to do, and we weren't able to scale it up. We had a lot of excess demand for our training. And we could get, typically at least 100 applications for 30 seats, and sometimes many more than that. So we were turning many people away. The purpose of capacity development fundamentally is to help both the individuals working in their, say, central bank and finance ministry, but also the institutions themselves to make them stronger as well. So it's to help those people develop the skills they need so that they can implement sound macroeconomic policies, so that we don't have to go in when crisis strikes and lend money, right? So we're trying to get the conditions in place to strengthen these countries and these institutions. Okay, I think I have a different presentation showing than, okay, this is fine, I can adapt. So this is, I just went over this, some of the topics and the hands-on nature of the training. So we developed this online program in partnership with edX to expand training to government officials, to have blended learning where they take an online course before they come to the face-to-face course. But I'd really like to focus here on sharing knowledge through massive open online courses, through MOOCs. So all of our online courses are true MOOCs. We don't charge for them. We haven't even opted to offer verified certificates because we don't want the government officials to feel like if they get an honor code certificate, that's of some lesser value. We don't want them to feel like they have to pay for these courses. So we do offer all of our courses for free, unlimited enrollment, and we make it available to the world. So out of our results, we have, in this first sort of year and a half or so, we have 8,500 successful participants. About half of those are actually government officials. We market pretty heavily to that crowd. And they also have higher pass rates than sort of, the general public who may be less familiar with our work. But we do get strong interest from people outside of that core audience as well. And we've reached about 188 countries and territories. So what are we trying to do with these MOOCs? Well, I mean, fundamentally, we wanted to provide more training and better training to government officials. The course content is really targeted towards them. So if you're not too interested in debt sustainability analysis and getting into an Excel spreadsheet and understanding how we do that, then you may not be interested in these courses. There's not a lot of economic theory in there. There's enough so that we can really get into building skills and the applications. But once you develop a MOOC, the marginal cost of opening it up and running it as a MOOC, opening it up to everyone is relatively low. So we wanted to do that. So we view this as a public good that we want to make available to the world. Our motivation there is, well, we think this is positive outreach for the IMF. We get a little bit of a bad rap sometimes. And so we think that if we can help people to understand our work better, and also just be seen as open and sharing what we know, we think that that can be a good thing. And we have gotten some feedback in our end-of-course surveys that suggest that that is happening. But also on even a higher level, we hope that this helps people to understand better kind of what is going on in the global economy, what's happening in their own economy. If they can understand economic issues better, that maybe that'll raise the level of discourse of, you know, the level of conversation about economic policy in the countries that we're reaching. So that's ultimately what we would like to happen. I think I'll just stop it at that slide. Thanks.
Do we have Lance?
Hi, folks. Can you see me and hear me? Hello? Can you see me and hear me? Hi, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you for having me today. Thanks, Will, and to the organizers, especially for being willing to bring me in virtually. I'm kind of living on the road these days, so I appreciate it. It's exciting to be here with my fellow panelists representing such awesome organizations doing really cool work. I have to say it's really inspiring to think about new directions and seeing those presentations so far. So thank you for that opportunity. I want to spend a few minutes, just like our panelists did, describing what our organization is. I'm going to try to share my screen here to pull up a short presentation about that. Unlike, say, the American Museum of Natural History, MoMA, the International Monetary Fund, Gilder Lehrman isn't exactly a household name. And so I thought I would just kind of briefly describe who we are, what we do, and what we're all about, and then kind of speak briefly about our program. I'll just wait. I'll wait for the image to catch up there. Okay, can you see the screen share?
Not quite yet. We have it now.
Okay, very good.
It appears to have disappeared again.
Appeared to have disappeared. All right, let me try this. I was trying to go full screen to make it a little more visible, but we can do it this way instead. All right, is there a shared screen that you guys can see?
Probably not what you mean.
Hooray, okay. All right, so yeah, so to talk briefly about who we are and what we do. So the Gilder Lehrman Institute was founded in 1994. It's founded by Richard Gilder and Louis Lehrman, who are philanthropists who are passionate about American history, education, dedicated to improving the teaching of history in public schools. The Institute pursues this singular but profoundly important mission through a wide range of programs, from direct teacher training to scholarly fellowships and book prizes that are intended to promote excellence in the next generation of historians. And 2 decades after the Institute's founding, it's kind of difficult to exaggerate just how crucial this work continues to be. On this front, I really echo the points of some of my panelists with regard to our importance, or what we see as the importance of what we're doing. One thing that to me kind of sums it up is the government data that tell us that only 67% of history teachers in the United States at public schools majored in the field while in college, and only a third are certified to teach the subject. And so the result is that a tremendous portion of American public school students are learning or not about the paths that brought us to today from non-experts. And that's a problem. History, of course, is the academic discipline that is founded on the notion of contingency. There's this old formula that history is about people making choices and choices making a difference. And in that phrase, of course, the people aren't always all the people, but the difference they've made is what we call modern life. So our leaders, our achievements, our failures, our accomplishments, and our shame all spring from history, this many-threaded narrative of the choices and consequences that build every new day. And so we ought to teach about it as well as we possibly can. Now, as you can probably tell, we're kind of fired up about this, but to appreciate the importance of good history teaching, we really don't need to get philosophical. The practical points are striking enough. After high school, most folks never again enter a history class. And so every day, we have young students, future voters, and political leaders who hear what proved to be their final lessons on, say, the history of race and ethnicity in the United States, the history and the origins of the modern Middle East and why that matters, the role of government in our lives, how that came to be. But as they hear these lessons, as we noted often from non-experts, what are they learning? Sometimes, especially lately, you wonder, do you ever hear a politician offering a kind of lousy or destructive vision for society and wonder, oh my gosh, what if that person gets elected? Well, history teachers can fix that problem before it starts. The idea for the Gilder Lehrman Online Graduate Course Program came about in the context of our overall work to promote teacher education, but most directly in response to requests from teachers in our network. Growing numbers had expressed great interest in taking part in summer seminars that we offer with leading historians, but work and family obligations meant that they couldn't spend days away from home. So I suggested that we try offering a seminar online. The organization's leadership invested in it, and we began our pilot course in 2012. We actually launched registration the same month that Coursera was chartered. And so it was very ad hoc in the beginning. There was a request from the network. There was the effort to see what we could do to figure out how to test those waters and learn about what sorts of online offerings are really useful to K-12 history teachers. We now offer 8 courses per academic year, and they're each broadcast live in real time. And last year, along with Adams State University, the partner of the American Museum of Natural History, among others, we launched a master's degree program, the Gilder Lehrman MA in American History. And so with the degree, more teachers will be able to teach advanced placement history courses. Most will enjoy a bump in pay. We built and we continue to develop our own proprietary courseware platform, and that includes portals for student engagement on the blog, student-faculty discussion of grades, optional quizzes that we write following each lecture to offer students the chance to check their comprehension of key themes covered during that session. And for each course, we recruit an outstanding teacher scholar to instruct up to 100 teachers in pursuit of graduate credit. Teachers write graduate-level essays advancing original arguments about course themes, primary documents, and they create lesson plans to ensure that they have practical tools for bringing course content directly into their classrooms. There's a tuition fee that we charge that allows us to cover all costs, but we also offer scholarships. So we found a way to be self-sustaining while also offering some financial aid. And we also offer a modestly priced auditing option for those who wish to participate at their own pace. So there's a variety of entry portals. Now, it's a little funny for me to be at a conference on learning with MOOCs and talk about courses that have just 100 participants each. It's not exactly massive, and so in a kind of literal sense, it doesn't make a MOOC. But our goal from the start has been to bring into an online space the seminar-style instruction that we found so useful in our own graduate work. And we do this for a number of reasons, but perhaps most importantly because of the content of what we're teaching. High-quality history education, we believe, embraces the messy, indeterminate evidence of human experience. Especially at the graduate level, knowledge in the humanities is elastic. And so informed conversation, dialogue, is essential in order to form meaningful historical understandings. But we're not only bringing the age-old seminar format online, we're trying to innovate too. I'll offer 2 quick examples of this. The first is represented by the many virtual field trips we've produced on location at historical sites relevant to several of our courses. During a course on the South in American history, for example, we offered several brief field trips during each class meeting. And so in the time that it took to queue up a video, we could whisk all of our live participants out of the virtual classroom and down to a 17th century settlement to speak with historical interpreters about the land and the people met by English colonists. At a later point in the course, we visited the home of the first African-American woman to charter a bank in the United States, in Richmond, Virginia, as it happens, in the middle of the era of Jim Crow. We also had students complete projects working with digital history tools that visualize emancipation during the Civil War and changes in voting patterns across all of American history. So if you think about just the logistics of the field trips alone, it would have been impossible with such a large group. And on our own, we really couldn't have produced the fascinating work, the new scholarship, frankly, that resulted from a geographically diverse group of teachers manipulating cutting-edge digital history tools. And so in this way, what we're aiming to do is not simply transfer existing knowledge. We understand that online education in the humanities is most effective, most significant, really most vital if we use the digital tools that we have to develop new insights, to unearth trends and stories that would be hidden without these tools. And we think we do that most usefully if teachers play a central role. So to date, we have enrolled 732 teachers in graduate study of American history. Participants join us from every continent so far except Antarctica. I say so far because I do have hopes that we will reach Antarctica eventually. This semester, we are running 3 courses concurrently, each broadcast from our professors' home bases. And that helps to explain why I'm joining you via video link, living out of a suitcase right now. Our course catalog covers 4 centuries of North American history, and we offer students the option to pursue courses through thematic programs of study, such as history and literature, race and ethnicity, constitutional history, alternatively through completely customized curricula that fit their own teaching needs. So, as others on the panel would be familiar with from working with teachers, the teachers who enroll in our courses reach tens of thousands of students every year, even with a relatively small cohort of 730-some teachers. And as such, they're really on the front lines of historical memory making. I often think of a story that the Yale historian David Blight tells about a meeting he once attended at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, which is in Cincinnati. One of those in attendance was Fred Shuttlesworth, who was a civil rights activist who led the Birmingham chapter of Martin Luther King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, during the 1960s. Blight asked Shuttlesworth how the museum on which he was on the board, how it might grapple with some of the darkest moments in our history's tragic history with race and violence, how to tell these stories honestly and respectfully, how to tell them not only to scholars who would visit the museum, but also to families, to children, to ordinary folks perhaps unprepared, sometimes unwilling, to confront difficult facts. Blight tells us that at the meeting, the Reverend Shuttlesworth had been quiet throughout most of the meeting, but he summed up his advice in a perfect phrase. He said, if you don't tell it like it was, it can never be as it ought to be. So with every course that we offer, I try to make sure that we do just that we tell it like it was, so that teachers who are accessing so many children's minds every day have the opportunity to shape a future as it ought to be. We've found that online learning has a role to play, and we think the more we embrace that medium and push the boundaries of what we can imagine, the closer we'll be to realizing that goal. So, thank you.
All right. So we're a little bit short on time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose one sort of general question to the group, and then I will relinquish my time to the rest of you if you want to raise any questions to either individual presenters or to the whole group. So to start with a sort of general question, I want to think about this panel in relation to what seems like the zeitgeist of this conference, at least for today. One question that was raised in the introductory remarks, was who is the learner? And in the parlance of this panel, it might be who is your public, right? And the question that I want to pose to all of our lovely presenters here is, who is your public, and what choices did you make in terms of content or design in order to serve that public?
Well, Traditionally, our public has been those who had physical access to the museum, and that includes something like 1 million New York City school kids a year, and then about 3 or 4 million others as well. And so over the last 20 years, the museum has really created these digital initiatives to go beyond the walls of the museum and to open things up. And so much of our current effort is focused on teachers because of the multiplier effect that was just mentioned in terms of their ability to reach so many more students. But I think, as I described, we are really focusing across the lifespan from sort of K through Gray, and we have sets of programs at the museum that support that continuum. And I think that in terms of how we design our experiences, we try to do it in accordance with what we believe we know about both informal learning in informal settings and learning in online settings. But it's the evolving practice, and so there is a strong research and evaluation effort within the museum, as well as what we're informed by going on outside. And so in general, I think it's about trying to create accessible experiences that take advantage of our strengths in terms of our scientific staff and our digital resources, and that create powerful educational experiences and experiences that excite and engage and encourage people to be inspired by science and potentially to choose it as a career, or just to have something that they feel is worthwhile.
Like Rob, we end up having about 3 to 4 million on-site visitors. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. At MoMA, we end up having about 3 to 4 million visitors on-site every year. However, we have over 20 million online visitors to MoMA.org every year. So that's a big thing for us to realize how many people are trying to access our content, whether it is online courses, whether it's other videos we have on YouTube or live streamed events that we host. So we've realized that we definitely have a large audience out there, and we've tried to find different ways to cater to them. So with our online course initiatives in general, we've, again, broken it out into these 3 categories. We have our teens producing content for teens by teens. They teach the courses once they're live, so we're able to hit that audience. To date, we've had almost 300 teen learners taking these courses, and hope to have more now that we have an international collaboration. With some of our old traditional courses, we tend to hit more enrichment learners, those who are retired and are just interested in picking up another skill later in life, whether that's learning to paint or do collage, or whether it's just the general interest of modern and contemporary art and trying to get more information about that. We provide learners with behind-the-scenes access to our galleries, to our educators, to conservators, curators, those who they would never be able to interact with. And to go into an empty gallery and see Starry Night is something most people will never be able to do at our museum because it is rather crowded. But also partnering with Coursera, it's provided us a new way to hit the teacher audience. We have so many teachers come on site for a variety of programs every year, but to be able to give access to this content to those online is really incredible. We find that with Coursera, our average age group is 25 to 35-year-olds, and it ends up being females, mostly the BRIC demographic. So for us, that's great because we're trying to hit a wider international audience. But it's also really interesting to see those who are non-educators taking our courses. One time we had a doctor from Greece taking our art and inquiry course and building off of some of those skills and applying it to his practice with his medical students. So I think for us, it's just really incredible to see how far and wide we can go and how we can cater our content in different ways to hit learners of all ages. I really liked your K to Gray. I've never heard that before, but that was a great expression. So we definitely fall into that category as well.
So, as I said during my presentation, is this coming through? Am I close? Is it on? Okay. So our primary audience is government officials, people who work for their central bank and finance ministry around the world. We did, once we decided to develop MOOCs, we started to go a little crazy when we were designing the courses. We kept saying, well, what about everybody else? Are they going to, what do we need to put in this course for them? And we just, in the end, we decided we really had to keep that core audience in mind and then see who came to the table for that content, because it's really hard to straddle two very different audiences. So our courses really are geared towards government officials, but as I said, we've had strong take-up from other audiences. In the most recent MOOC that we offered, which was introductory course on kind of understanding how to analyze the economy, it's called Financial Programming and Policies. It's a very obscure title, but it comes from our face-to-face course. We had about a quarter of the people in the course who replied to the entry survey described themselves as students. About another quarter was government officials. We had a good size piece that called themselves economists or analysts, financial analysts, and engineers seemed to like our courses. Maybe the word programming in there or something drew them in, and then they realized what they got into. I don't know. But we have seen that in other courses as well. But just to give you an example of what these other audiences might get from these courses, we have one short course on energy subsidy reform that looks at the costs of energy subsidies. So the government, keeping, say, gas prices below market cost. That costs the government a lot of money. They run deficits. They can't do this forever. But it keeps the public happy, right? Because energy is cheap. And so that course tries to show what the true costs of that are, both in terms of the cost to the government and then, the unrecorded costs in terms of damage to the environment. And we really saw good participation on the discussion forum of people coming to that forum from all over the world and talking about how they could see this playing out in their own countries. They know that these prices are lower than they should be. And the other big message in this course, which I think they really did understand, is that this is not benefiting the poor. The people driving cars are not the poorest people. So the governments think they need to do this to help the poor, but in fact the benefits of this don't go to the right people. So that's, those are some of the messages we try to convey in this. And so we really, I think, got a lot of engagement even from outside of our core audience.
Lance, do you have anything to add?
I do, yeah. So as far as our core audience, it's really 97% teachers is what we find, K-12 teachers in public schools in the United States and also American schools overseas. The other 3% tends to be represented by what we call public historians, so museum staff and National Park Service interpreters in particular. And I think one thing that we try to do in reaching that particular audience and in crafting our programs, so I guess a couple of quick things come to mind. One is that like some of the other programs that we're talking about today, we offer a certain number of sessions per course, 10 sessions per course. 6 of those are lecture and discussion, seminar-style sessions with professors. The other 4 per course are with pedagogy instructors, so people who are really just focused on how do you take the scholarly content into a classroom. And so in that way, we try to really calibrate to our audience, to our unique audience. Also, one thing that we are really driven by is how do we take tools that we have through online learning, through the internet, to make the virtual classroom actually better abled, more enabled to do interesting things in terms of learning than we can actually do in person. And to one end of that, we try to provide the very best faculty that we possibly can. So our teachers are taking courses from really the best historians who are working today, and there's no history department that gathers all these people. We're working outside of the university context in a way that Coursera really helped to pioneer. And sorry, is my audio there still?
It's still there. Are you still with us, Lance? Lance, can you finish up what you were saying?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so basically by working outside of that university context, we're trying to offer teachers something that they really couldn't get in person. So rather than get into that kind of cynical dichotomy of what's better, online learning or in-person learning, we're trying to focus on the things that we can bring to online learners that you really can't in a classroom. And for us, one of those is access to an entire virtual department of top-tier faculty.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hello. I was really interested when you mentioned that a lot of the students in your courses are from Sub-Saharan Africa, because I worked with the World Fund in Mexico, and one of the challenges we have is to think of the technological apparatus of the people on the other side. So, the question is primarily for you, but also for anyone else who have some insights on how did you design a course that is engaging, that has multimedia, that has wonderful resources, but that also takes under consideration the fact that you're working on a global scale, so you don't know necessarily what the other person has in terms of bandwidth, software, and hardware. So if you have anything you could tell us in terms of that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, actually, we were really worried about this. In our very first online course, it was a private course, but we had about 400 government officials enrolled. And we saw that we had 30 officials from the Central Bank of Zimbabwe. I guess word got out. And we were really worried about what the performance would be for them. And in the end, we do get more reports from Sub-Saharan Africa about, in our end-of-course survey, that there were problems with streaming or even with downloading videos. Sometimes they had to rely on the transcripts. But our pass rate in the region is still quite good. I mean, our overall pass rate in the courses, I said, it was 60%, but for government officials, it's even more like 70%. So in a recent course I looked, I saw, for Cameroon, there were 40% of participants said they had problems with streaming videos, 15% said they couldn't download videos, and yet their pass rate, their completion rate was 70%. So somehow they're still muddling through, they're still getting through these courses. So it's something that we continue to look at and think about. And being mobile friendly is one way to deal with that. And edX is partway there, not completely. But we think about it. But they seem to be getting through.
Do we have any other queries?
Well, apologies if I missed an explanation of this earlier. I was curious, just for the people working on teacher professional development, did you kind of explain how the sort of what your courses offer kind of fit into the existing frameworks for teachers getting credit for professional development within their schools? I'm just curious how those mechanics work.
Well, in terms of the kind of district credit, that teachers use in order to satisfy local requirements or to move up the salary scale, those things are, done on a district-by-district basis. I'm not aware of any, maybe more than, less than a handful of situations in which districts have not approved our courses for credit. I think the fact that they are the semester equivalent graduate courses that people can either opt to take or not to take for graduate credit gives them a rigor that I think generally the district people recognize. So it hasn't been an issue, but ultimately it does require individual district approval.
Yeah, I think our courses fall into that similar category as well. I know when we went about production for creating teacher professional development courses, we intentionally collaborated with the head of our school and teacher programs, who runs workshops multiple times a year, bringing in teachers specifically for our New York audience, but brings those teachers in and takes them through a series of workshops for professional development on site. So she has been doing this for quite some time now and has a very close relationship with various school districts in New York as well. So she had a lot of that information coming into it, which made it really easy to find ways to translate that content into an an online educational course.
Just to maybe add to what Rob and Allegra have just said, I'm largely echoing them. I think our work with teachers, I think anyone who works with teachers in the United States, one of the great challenges is the localized nature of the American education system. And so, there are literally thousands of different sets of standards in districts across the country. It's sometimes even at the school level. So you would drive yourself crazy and waste time and money if you tried to really fit all of those. But we find that master's degrees are one of those, it's kind of a common currency. Master's degrees and graduate credit leading toward that or not. It's a sort of common currency that tends to result in more responsibility for teachers, often greater pay. So that's one thing that we try to focus on. And for the auditing option that we offer, where teachers can earn certificates of completion, we really kind of describe in a cover note that goes with that the nature of the course, the number of contact hours involved, so that districts can approve on a kind of one-by-one basis, approve those courses for acceptance under district guidelines for PD. So you kind of have to be flexible and creative in working around it. But as Rob said, so far I'm not aware of any school district that has rejected our credentials.
I'm sorry. I should clarify in my case that I was actually talking about our online courses, the seminars on science courses, and not the MOOCs. And so, with respect to the MOOCs, I have less complete information about the extent to which teachers are taking to their districts and getting professional development credit. I know that it's happening in some cases, but I'm not. It's something that I'm actually interested in knowing more about and understanding how that's working and whether and what kinds of challenges, if any, teachers are having along those lines.
Okay, we probably have time for one or two quick questions.
So I have a question for the museums. I think it's really awesome that everyone's getting involved and creating courses, but there's another role you guys have to play, because your collections are really important to teachers across the world to teach to the world as well. There is the Teacher Act, which allows us to teach inside our campuses, dealing with copyright issues in one way, but now in the MOOC world, it's a very different situation that has not been cracked, and I'm wondering if the museums have talked about this at all and giving access to platforms and to schools so that people can get other perspectives about what people think about your guys' collections.
Let's see. I'm afraid I'm not actually familiar, I think, with what you're referring to. So I would just have to sort of throw out a blanket statement to say that the museums, the exhibits, the general museum space is accessible. Of course, the collections not so much typically to the public, but I think that's something that we try to bring out in the digital realm, and so there are a lot of samples from our collections that are available online. But I'd be interested in talking to you more because I need to understand it better, I think.
I can definitely jump in here because we definitely run into a lot of issues with copyright, especially because we're dealing with art and reproductions of works of art and digitizing them and making sure that they're color corrected and highest resolution. And there's definitely a lot of hurdles to jump over, I would say. When we first started doing the online courses, we were in a closed platform, and that ended up being really easy for us to get around some of the limitations with our rights holders. It was also a great way for us to pull in other resources from the internet, art store, what have you, because again, it was closed, people could not download the videos, and they were only given access to our content for a limited period of time. When we gravitated over towards producing MOOCs, things changed because now people can download videos. Now it's an open audience. You can't control how long people can access your content for. So it's something we talk about a lot when we're selecting artworks, and we try to select artworks that we know are easier to clear rights for. So the museum works very closely with the Artist Rights Society, ARS, and we have a an agreement with them that makes it very easy for us to use the content or the images of the artworks. But I think where we really succeed in doing this is because we're producing content for educational purposes. So that changes our agreements with them. The museum runs into challenges, for example, if they're posting something on social media, it's a totally different agreement than if the image is being used in an educational sense. So that's really benefited us. Again, it does become unfortunate if there's a really great work of art that we want to use, but the copyright clearance is out of our budget. We just can't include that work of art. So hopefully as things progress in the future, it'll continue to be easier for us to do this. But for right now, it's definitely something that we talk about as soon as we start selecting works of art to ensure that we can grant access to learners and that they can use these images, because the truth of the matter is if you Googled them, you could probably find most of them online. So it's a challenge from a museum perspective, but we've kind of figured out a workaround in the interim.
Now, I should say, to clarify, now that I think I understand the question a little better, I think, the collections are owned by the museum, and so I don't think there's an issue. There may be some exceptions there, but generally they're actually within the museum's ownership.
All right, I think we've pretty much exhausted our time here, but I want to thank all of you for coming out, and I think we should thank this very generous audience. All right. I hope we continue the conversation after this now, too.